apart here, right in front of me. And I'm trying desperately to get myself together, but you all can sit down while I'm doing that. Well, it doesn't want to go on there. Here, we're going to save this for later.
You want a hand?
No, this is fine. Can you all hear me? Is it working? Oh, good, it's working. I'm Bill Parnell, and I'm the Archdeacon for Mission of the Diocese of New York. And I am so glad to be here this morning, not only because it gave me the opportunity to have a lovely ride up through the Hudson Valley from Manhattan to come here to Peekskill, but because I love coming out to the parishes of this diocese. It gives me new life week by week to come into our churches and see what God is doing. And I want to tell you that the Spirit is alive and well in the Diocese of New York. And from what I know of this church, the Spirit is alive and well here too. And so I'm glad to be here this morning. Not the least because I happen to love your rector. And the only thing that would make this more fun for me this morning would be if she were here. But then I guess if she were here, I wouldn't need to be here. And so y'all try and get her to invite me back sometime when she's going to be around. But I love Carly because I've had an opportunity to work with her in some different ways over the last year or so. We both serve on the alumni executive committee of Virginia Seminary, so I see her down in Virginia a couple of times a year as we're looking after the well-being of our beloved alma mater. Also, I've worked with her on the continuing Indaba process that I suppose you all know she's a part of that and has just been over to the Diocese of Derby in England, which along with the Diocese of Mumbai in India, we are entering into a year-long conversation with people in those dioceses because, you know, the Anglican Communion is closer than it's ever been, but when you get close, you sort of find out some things about each other that you're not quite sure what to make of. And so these conversations, these continuing Indaba conversations are so important to the life of our communion. And I'm thrilled that Carly, with her eloquence and good humor, is a part of those conversations. And of course, you all know that she has taken on such an important role in the life of our diocese recently as the co-chair of the search committee as we prepare to elect our next bishop. And so to have Carly at the helm in that has been a great comfort to many of us who know of her wisdom. So now don't tell her I was singing her praises while she wasn't here, because I wouldn't want to think I was talking about her behind her back. Now, but it was all good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you something. How many of you got to church an hour early this morning? Did anybody get to church an hour early? So you all remembered to reset your clocks. Oh, some people back there raising their hands. Most of us remembered to reset our clocks this morning back 1 hour. I think of this as one of those weekends of the year when collectively the society says, gotcha, you know, to those who didn't quite get the message that our time was changing. And at least in the fall, if you don't get the message, you arrive an hour early and you can just kind of sit around and have a cup of coffee or something. In the spring, whenever it's the other way around, you arrive just in time to say amen and go to coffee hour, which, well, that may not be too bad either. We can get right down to it. But I also think of this as one of those gotcha Sundays for the clergy, because, you know, this is the Sunday after All Saints' Day. And it's one thing when you're a parish priest and you sort of have some control over this and you're a part of the planning. But if you're coming into the parish like I am, you don't quite know what's going to happen, whether it's going to be All Saints or the 20 whatever, something after Pentecost. But I was good. I called this week and said, okay, now what are the readings for this Sunday? And even though we're using the scriptures for the 20-something Sunday after Pentecost, 21st I think it is, our hymns are geared towards All Saints Day. And so we're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. And I love these banners around here because that's my favorite All Saints hymn right there. The old English school hymn about I sing a song of the saints of God, patient and brave and true. And you know, the Archdeacon likes to have fun in church. I'll just tell you, it's my weakness. I cut up in church. And I love that hymn because of the second verse, which goes, and one was a soldier, and one was a priest, and one was slain by a fierce wild beast. You know that? But I always butcher it. I sing, and one was a soldier, and one was a beast, and one was slain by a fierce wild beast. Listen, it is our great thanksgiving to be together. Christians should be joyful, even if we have to cut up a little bit in church to do it. We ought to be joyful about this because it is good news that we have to share to the world. And I am sick and tired of dour Christians, so let's just get over that right now and have a good time with this. Now, let's see. We've got these readings today. This gospel reading about these 10 virgins with their lamps. And it's an interesting story, isn't it? Because on the surface, it sounds like the smart ones were these 5 stingy women who hoarded the oil. So it sounds like if you're going to come out on top, if you're going to get into the kingdom in this world, you need to be stingy and hoard lots of oil. Well, that doesn't sound too much different from the way the world is right now, does it? So that's not quite right. Something else is going on here, I think. Let me ask you something. How do you think about the kingdom of heaven? What do you call to mind when that phrase is said? Because, you know, Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven more than anything else. He was constantly talking about it. And I think whenever we say the kingdom of heaven, a lot of times we think about something that is out there in the distant future. And the early Christians, they thought it was going to happen right then and there. And so there's a kind of urgency about it when they talk about the kingdom of heaven. But we've been hanging around doing this for a couple of thousand years now, and I think Christians have started thinking in terms of the kingdom of heaven as something that's way, way out there, that seems like it's so far distant in the future that we can barely see it, especially as many troubles as this world has. We sometimes think we can barely see it. And you know what else we do when we start talking about the kingdom of heaven is we are given to thinking about who is going to be in and who is going to be out. So we think wise virgins get in and foolish virgins aren't there. We think sheep get in and we think goats stay out. You know, you give us half a chance to choose up sides, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We start worrying, fretting about who's going to be in and who's going to be out. And I'm not sure that's what Jesus intended in talking about the kingdom of heaven. He talked about the kingdom of heaven a lot But he talked about it not as something way out in the distant future, but as something that was immediate. He kept saying, the kingdom of God has come near to you. And so the kingdom of heaven is not something that is way, way out there, something linear that we will eventually get to. But in fact, the kingdom of heaven is what undergirds life. And it sort of pops up here and bursts through there and pokes into reality in another way. And so when it comes to those who's in, who's out questions, I don't think it's so much about what God is going to do in the long term, because I believe in the God who used Jesus to talk about going after that one lost sheep and leaving the 99 there. I believe in the God who, through Jesus, said, nothing is going to be lost. So I guess you can call me a hopeful universalist. I figure God is going to sort it out, and the last verse of the Bible really is, and God said, I win. And so instead of who's in and who's out, since this kingdom is popping up all around us, for me the question is more like, who gets it? And who misses it? Who understands what's going on? And who's too busy to care about it? It's a much more immediate thing. And so this scripture reading that we have today from Matthew's Gospel is a little story about that. And you know something? It's surrounded by 4 other stories that have to do with the same thing, where Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like this, and then goes on to tell about it. And in each one of those, we catch a glimpse of what I'm going to call kingdom values that we need to pay attention to. And at the risk of preaching 5 sermons this morning, at the risk, I'm going to touch briefly on all 5 of those stories. I'm going to try and do it quickly, because the worst thing you can have is greeting people at the back of the church and they come to you, I loved your sermon, sir, and then they're walking away thinking, all 5 of them. No, we don't want to do that this morning. But 5 stories that Matthew has given us in quick succession. The kingdom of heaven is like this. Here's the first one. 2 people are out in the field. One is taken, one's left. 2 women are grinding meal together. One is taken and one is left. It's as though a householder were in his bed in the middle of the night, and the king arrives, and if he's awake, he will greet him, and if he's not, he's going to miss it. One is taken, one is left. One gets it, one does not. Second story, right after that, has to do with the master of a household who has gone away for a time and leaves the head servant in charge. And we are given 2 contrasting versions of that picture. In one, the head servant diligently does his job and sees that all the other people who are guarding the estate are doing their jobs, and the master of the house returns early. And everything is well. Contrasting story, that head servant is not doing very nice things, being cruel to the other servants, not taking care of the estate, and the master returns and everything is in a mess. You know that bumper sticker that says, Jesus is coming, look busy? It doesn't work. Because try as you might to get it all together at the last minute so God will think you've been hard at work the whole time. It doesn't work that way. And so that's the contrasting picture that we have there. Third story. Third story is the one that we have in the Gospels today about wise and foolish virgins, the ones who brought enough oil and the ones who didn't, the ones who came prepared and the ones who didn't. Fourth story, right in line here in Matthew's Gospel, the parable of the talents. If you've been around the church for a while, you know that story about the master of the household is going away. He gives one servant 5 talents, one servant 2, and the third servant 1. He comes back. The servant who had the 5 talents has turned it into 10. The one who had 2 has turned it into 4. And the poor guy who had 1 talent was so afraid that he was going to lose it that he buries it in the ground and does nothing with it. And the master comes back and says, well done to the first 2, but to that third one who wasn't able to risk a thing and in fact wound up with less than he had before because he could have at least invested it. The master says, you missed out on it, buddy. Fifth story, the great judgment, where Jesus says to the righteous folks, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was sick, you took care of me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And the righteous folks are saying, what? When did that happen? We don't remember that. And Jesus says, whenever you did it to the least of one of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. 5 stories where in each case Jesus is saying, the kingdom of heaven is like this. Here's what you got to look out for if you're going to be one of the ones who gets it. Unless you want to be one of the ones who misses out on what God is doing. Go back to that first story. 2 in the field, one's taking one's left. 2 grinding meal together, one's taking one's left. You know, there's nothing that distinguishes them. They're all going about their ordinary day-to-day business. The question is, how are they going about that day-to-day business? How many of you have ever felt like you were stuck in a rut? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's just that daily grind that just goes on and one day folds into the next one and it's go back another day, another dollar, all that kind of stuff. And you just become a cog in the wheel, don't you? Unless you use your imagination and your creativity to do something different. It doesn't have to be that way, is what God is saying to us, because if we will love God with all of our minds, among other things, we have been blessed with imagination and creativity that causes us to be able to see new possibilities for how things can be. And so when we're out in that field day after day, or when we are in the daily grind, if you will, guess what? You have a kingdom value, a kingdom gift that you can use, which is the imagination and creativity with which God has blessed you. That's a kingdom value. Second story, the one about the servant, the head servant, who follows his work diligently as opposed to the one who sort of slacks off. In the work of the kingdom of God, there is no time for slackers. And I want to tell you, I think too often we who seek to follow Jesus are guilty of being slackers. We should be about our work diligently, claiming each and every day the good news of Jesus Christ and sharing that everywhere we go. And that doesn't mean, when I talk about sharing the good news of Jesus Christ everywhere you go, people think, oh God, there he goes again, wanting us to get all Jesus-y on them. Well, sometimes you may need to get Jesus-y on them. But more than that, you need to be an icon of that good news. You need to live your life as the good news. It's not so much a matter of what you tell as it is a matter of who you are. And it is that work of being the icon of good news that you need to set about diligently doing your work. Third story, that one about the wise and foolish virgins and their lamps with or without oil. It really has to do with preparedness, doesn't it? It has to do with perseverance. In that second story, the master of the house came back earlier than was expected. Oops, got caught. In the third story, the one about the wise and foolish virgins, the master of the house, the bridegroom, is arriving later than expected. You never know when God is going to show up. And so you better be prepared for it to be the long haul. What is going to sustain us in following Jesus over the long haul? It is a matter of perseverance, of sticking with it, because God will show up. That's for certain. God just might not show up when you expect. So best to be prepared, best to be persevering in that work of following Jesus. And what about the value that's communicated in that fourth story of the talents? The one who missed out was the one who held it so closely, who buried it because he was afraid he was going to lose it. The other two risked for something good. They were willing to let go of it in order that something greater might be created. And I want to suggest to you that the kingdom value that's communicated in that story is risking something for the good. Being willing to let go. Jesus never criticized anyone for risking for the sake of the gospel and falling flat on their face. You know why? Because Jesus will pick you up again and let you go on and risk some more. What Jesus criticizes is those who are so afraid, so fearful of losing what they have that they clutch onto it and do nothing with it. And of course, that fifth story of those who were fed and clothed and visited and taken care of. You know what that's about. That's about being willing to get out of our own little box of our own needs and reach out to one another and to our neighbors in compassion. And that too is a kingdom value of looking beyond ourselves. It's not all about me. It's about us. Now, I know that's 5 sermons in one, but these are 5 stories, one right after the other, that communicate collectively a series of kingdom values. And I think this is what the Gospel or Matthew was trying to tell us. Here's what the kingdom of heaven is like. And if you don't want to miss it, here's the kind of person you've got to be. You need to use your imagination. You need to be creative. You need to be diligent in your work. You've got to be persevering, in other words, trusting that God is going to be there eventually. You have got to risk for the sake of something good. And finally, you have got to get beyond your own self and reach out beyond you. Those are kingdom values that any who wish to see the kingdom of God bubbling up around them, poking through into our lives when we least expect it, that's the kind of people that we need to be. Now, Carly said to me when she invited me to come, she said, "Now, Bill, we are in the midst of our stewardship season." And she said, it wouldn't hurt if you were to talk a little bit about stewardship, especially giving in hard times. And so I don't want your rector to get on my case. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about stewardship in the context of those kingdom values that I just talked about, of imagination and creativity and diligence and perseverance and risking for the good and compassion. You know, times are a little bit rough right now. Have you heard tell of that? I didn't think I was going to be telling you anything you didn't know already. It's rough out there. I mean, we feel it, most of us, in our own wallets, don't we? Money just doesn't go as far as it did. The incomes of the vast majority of us have not kept pace as we would have hoped. We see it in businesses that are afraid to bring on new workers. Instead, they're sort of clutching to the resources that they've got, unless they're paying it out by the millions to their CEOs. And we see it in the church, too. We see a church that is increasingly worried about money and the costs of operating and how we're going to keep our aging buildings in good repair and how we're going to keep a priest to serve the congregations of this diocese and all that. We see that kind of economic uncertainty all over the place. And I want to suggest to you that those kingdom values that we're talking about this morning have something to do with our stewardship during these difficult economic times. I spend a lot of time going around this diocese, commiserating with people in churches who are struggling. And I have to say to them a lot of times, you know what we need to do here is we need to be imaginative. We need to be creative. Because one of the things that you're called to do in hard times is to figure out how to do more with less. And that's really what's going on in the church these days, and I think it's going on in families and in businesses as well. We're having to figure out how to do more with less. And you want to know something? I think we not only wind up doing more with less, we wind up doing better with less. Why? Because we start asking the hard questions. We start challenging the assumptions that we didn't even want to think about before because we were a little bit too flush and we didn't have to worry about it. And so that kingdom value of imaginativeness and creativity is something that I think is a good stewardship principle about what we can do with the resources that we've got. I think we have to be diligent in our work in the church these days. I think we've got to be right on top of it all the time. It's easy to kind of slack off when you've got plenty. You can kind of coast for a little bit. It's not so easy whenever you're feeling the pinch. And I happen to know that this congregation felt that pinch, and you all turned this place around. So you know what that diligence is like. You don't need me to stand up here and tell you about diligence. We also need to be persevering in it. You know, I think sometimes that we think we're going to turn our churches or turn our businesses or turn our families around overnight. That somehow, we're going to walk into church next Sunday morning and Jesus will have appeared and made it all okay. Well, Lord, I hope so. But you want to know the honest truth? I think we need to be in this for the long haul. I'm not giving up on the church, are you? This is about persevering. This is about trusting that God is doing something new and different with us. And that the shift in what God is doing causes us a lot of discomfort. Change is messy. But the faithful are called to trust that God knows how to work through a mess to create something new. This is about risking. It's about risking something good, risking something big for the sake of something good. That's really, the temptation is to say, we got to hold on to what we've got tightly. And in fact, the kingdom value says, when things are like this, we need to be risking even more. We need to do it thoughtfully. We need to do it carefully. But risk is what we need to do. That is what the kingdom value teaches us about stewardship. And ultimately, this is also about compassion. It is about moving beyond myself, even when I'm afraid. Moving beyond my own needs and reaching out to my neighbors near and far, because let's face it, folks, we are all in this together. And that fifth kingdom value of compassion, of reaching out beyond our own needs, teaches us new ways of living. When I get stuck in my own little world, I don't change much. And I don't learn much about how to, let alone cope, how to thrive. When I reach out to others, my life gets changed. That's what happens. And I happen to think that the reason you all are here at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, sitting behind these stained glass windows whenever there's a beautiful world out there, is you believe that this place, this church, St. Peter's Peekskill, is a place where you learn those kingdom values. That's why you come, week after week. I've been in the church for a few years now, you can tell by the gray hair. And I want to tell you, I have learned in this church of ours more about being imaginative and creative than any other place I can think of. The church has drawn out my gifts more than any other place in my life. The church has taught me about what comes when you go at it diligently. And the kind of things that can happen when you're going at it diligently and God is supporting you in it and blessing the hard work that you do. The church has taught me more about perseverance than any other place I know of, because perseverance is really about trust. And this is where I've learned to trust more than any other place. It has taught me about taking risks. It has taught me about letting go so that God can do something with it. And it has taught me about compassion. with people that I never thought I would have the pleasure of meeting. It's a pretty motley crew that we've got in the church all around the world. And you learn who your neighbors are, and your life will be changed by it. That's why I keep coming. And that's why I keep giving. And I want to say, don't you tell your rector I said this. But if you're not getting those kingdom values out of the church, for heaven's sake, go and find some other place that you're going to get those values. If you're not getting those kingdom values, don't you give to this church. Do something better with your money than that. Don't you tell her I said that. But you know that's true. That you know that is why you want to give to a church, because you could give to a lot of places, and maybe you do give to some other places that are places that teach you kingdom values. The church doesn't have exclusive domain of that, but we're pretty darn good at it. And so as you contemplate your stewardship for the coming year, contemplate the kingdom values that you learn in this community of faith. I believe if you do, you will find that God will bless you richly. God will bless you richly with imagination and creativity. God will bless you with diligence. God will bless you with the trust that allows you to persevere. God will bless you by allowing you to have the courage to take a risk. And God will bless you by giving you new neighbors that you can reach out to with compassion and who will reach out to you in turn. That's why the kingdom isn't out there. That's why the saints aren't just in heaven. You can meet them in school or in lanes or at sea, in church, in trains, in shops, or at tea. You can even meet them right here at St. Peter's Peekskill. The kingdom is here.